Hi students, in this video I'm going to talk about the ways in which the political life of the United States changes as a result of the Civil War. There are changes that are taking place to the structure of the federal government in the middle of the Civil War that have significant long-term implications for the relationship of the federal government with the states and the relationship of the federal government with its citizens. And so we begin with the Morrill Act. Morrill, named after the senator from Vermont. Basically, once the Civil War begins, what you have now is a Congress that doesn't have Southern representatives in it. So there's no one representing the Southern agenda. And so you're going to see the federal government become much more federalist. It's going to become significantly more powerful. In the way it relates, and significantly more powerful and significantly more present in the way that it shapes the lives of the citizens. And the Morrill Act is a good example of this. It raises tariffs on imported products in order to protect American industries, in order to protect and to subsidize American industries. It means that they can charge more for their goods and can be more successful. That's one act. Another act is the Pacific Rail Act. This provides federal funding to build a huge, almost 2,000-mile railroad from Omaha, Nebraska to Sacramento, California. And this is one of the goals that the Western states always had going right back to the beginning of the 19th century. The goal of federal funding for infrastructure in order that what they produced they could bring to larger markets. So tariffs to protect New England and northern factories and industry, the railroad to support producers in the Midwest. And we also have the Homestead Act that offers land, 160 acres of land, to those who could farm that land for 4 years. And so this, again, is Western expansion. And lastly, not quite lastly, along with that, you have the Morrill Land Grant Act, which is the selling of federal land for the states on the understanding that they will build state universities to teach their citizens agricultural and mechanical arts. And so this is the beginning of the state or public university system, and it is a way in which the government is supporting the growth of agriculture within the Western states. And the last of these acts is the National Banking Act, which establishes national banks throughout the different states that can issue currency in the name of the federal government. So it's standardizing that currency, and like all these acts, it's expanding the influence and the power of the federal government. And the way that this was implemented, or the way that more money was raised to fund the war and to fund these programs, was through the introduction of an income tax. For the first time during the Civil War, you have a collection of tax on income. Either 3% if you meet a certain threshold, or 5% if you meet the top threshold. Not many people in the United States, only about 250,000, qualify to be taxed in this way. But this is the first time that income has been taxed in the history of the United States. And so you can see how the federal government is becoming more powerful, is interacting more directly with its citizens. It's taxing them, it's providing them with education. Different political factions in the North during the Civil War. We have the radical Republicans, who generally are abolitionists from New England, who don't want to just defeat the South, they want to totally remake this society and divide up the land equally between all the members of this society, including former slaves at the end of the war. And then you have less radical Republicans like Lincoln, who are more cautious about totally destroying this society rather than simply freeing the slaves and then developing the society from that point onwards. You have war Democrats who go along with the Republicans' war measures because they're fighting to defend the Union, but don't go along with Republican federalizing measures. So measures like the Land Grant Act or the Pacific Railroad Act, the war Democrats will vote against. They'll vote for war spending and for continuing the war in order to defend the Union, but a larger federal government is not something they support. And then you also have peace Democrats. These Democrats typically from areas like Illinois and Ohio that are close to Kentucky, that have large populations of people who had moved there from the South. These Democrats are openly sympathetic towards the Confederacy, want to end the war immediately, allow the Confederate States to go their own way. And Lincoln was, again, not shy to invoke civil law, even sometimes to step beyond the civil law, to suppress dissension from the war. So thousands of people, thousands of peace Democrats, also foreigners, were imprisoned by Lincoln, sometimes without trial, in order to prevent them from opposing the war in public.